Imagine it's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Your quarterly board meeting kicks off in exactly 1 hour.
Right. The absolute worst time for a surprise.
Exactly. And your newest junior analyst just knocked on your door and handed you a 50-page, totally comprehensive synthesis of a rival company's sudden shift in supply chain strategy.
Okay, sounds great so far.
Right. I mean, it is brilliant. The insights are razor sharp, the formatting is flawless, and it perfectly correlates their public statements with, like, hidden anomalies in their last 3 earnings calls.
But there's a catch, I'm guessing.
A massive catch. Your junior analyst is actually a piece of software. And you're sitting there staring at this beautiful document, having absolutely no idea if it just, confidently hallucinated the entire third quarter revenue projection because of some weird mathematical glitch in its probability engine.
Oh, man.
So you're holding basically a potential masterstroke in one hand and a potential career-ending landmine in the other.
And that tension right there, that is the defining reality for financial leadership today. It completely captures this transition we're in.
The transition from AI as a toy to AI as a tool.
Exactly. We're moving from viewing artificial intelligence as this, neat parlor trick to encountering it as an industrial-grade enterprise tool. We are fully leaving the novelty phase and entering the deployment phase.
Which is terrifying for a lot of people.
Oh, the anxiety you just described is incredibly widespread among executives. Especially those who have built their entire careers on the absolute certainty of the financial ledger. I mean, ledger balances are dozens.
Right. There's no middle ground.
Exactly. But generative AI, by its very nature, operates in a world of probabilistic text generation. It's not deterministic math. So reconciling those two worlds, the definitive ledger and the probabilistic AI, is really the primary challenge for the modern chief financial officer.
And that is exactly what we are dissecting today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are talking directly to you, the listener, the professional who, refuses to be blindsided by technological shifts.
Absolutely.
We're taking an extensive, highly practical look at artificial intelligence in the finance sector. But just to be crystal clear right from the jump, we are not entertaining those dystopian sci-fi thought experiments about robot accountants gaining sentience and taking over global markets.
Yeah, we can leave that to the movies.
Exactly. Instead, we're unpacking a highly tactical, commercially focused guide published by Byron Recruitment. It was authored by Peter Morgan, and it serves as this definitive playbook for how modern financial leaders can practically adopt tools like Anthropic's Claude to accelerate their workflows.
And crucially, how to do that without blowing up their control environments.
Yes, that part is key.
The real value of this specific source material lies in its grounding. The broader discourse around artificial intelligence, it's so often drifts into these philosophical debates about artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
Which doesn't help anyone trying to close out a quarter.
Right. It is frankly unhelpful to a CFO who just needs to know if they can automate a variance report by Friday. This guide anchors the conversation firmly in the day-to-day, high-stakes mechanics of a finance executive's actual reality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I know what the primary visceral anxiety is for anyone scanning the headlines right now. You see a frontier model analyze a massive data set in 3 seconds, and the immediate quiet fear that creeps into the back of your mind is, well, will a machine eventually replace me?
Yeah, the existential dread.
Exactly. We have to address that head on.
We do. And what's fascinating here is how the source text aggressively reframes that specific anxiety. The fundamental argument presented is that the immediate risk to your livelihood is actually not the technology itself.
Wait, really? Then what is it?
The existential threat is not Claude or some custom enterprise model sitting in a server farm. The actual tangible threat is a human being.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. It's another CFO or a highly ambitious finance director or a transformation leader at a competing firm. It's someone who learns to operate these models faster, better, and more commercially than you do. It's just the classic paradigm of leverage.
Oh, wow. That distinction changes the entire playing field. We're not looking at a human versus machine scenario at all.
Not at all.
We're looking at a human without a machine going up against a human wielding a machine. And historically, the human with the better leverage always wins out.
The Industrial Revolution provides the perfect parallel here. The factory owner who adopted steam power didn't get replaced by a steam engine. They replaced the factory owner who stubbornly stuck to water wheels.
That is a great analogy.
And that really dictates our entire mission for this discussion. We're going to map out exactly how you can build what the guide refers to as AI fluency.
AI fluency, I like that term.
Notice the terminology, yeah. It does not advocate for coding expertise or software engineering mastery. It demands fluency.
So it's about understanding the language of it, not necessarily building the engine.
Exactly. Our objective is to explore the mechanics of that fluency, how you construct an ironclad control environment while experimenting, and ultimately, how you dramatically increase your own executive marketability in an environment that is honestly evolving at breakneck speed.
I want to linger on that word fluency because it feels
Yeah.
like the golden key to this whole conversation. But before we get into the how of building fluency, we really need to justify the why.
Fair point.
Because I can hear the skeptical listener thinking, this still feels like hype. Maybe I can just wait this out for a few years until the software companies figure it out and sell me a polished, foolproof product. But the data in these sources paints a much more urgent picture, doesn't it?
Well, the statistics effectively annihilate the wait-and-see argument. The source cites IBM research indicating that a staggering 69% of CFOs now consider artificial intelligence central to their overarching finance transformation strategy.
69%. That's
Yeah.
huge.
It is. And furthermore, Deloitte's Finance Trends 2026 research corroborates this momentum. They report that 63% of finance departments are currently actively utilizing AI solutions in their daily operations.
So they aren't just thinking about it.
No, they're not in the procurement phase. They are not in the planning phase. They are in the execution phase today.
I'm looking at those numbers. Nearly 70% prioritizing it and over 60% already using it. And it tells me that if you're sitting on the sidelines treating this as a speculative future trend, you are already the minority. You are already behind the curve.
Without a doubt.
But I have to push back here, or at least play the role of the frustrated executive.
Go for it.
How in the world can I govern a technology I cannot personally build or mathematically understand? If I'm a CFO, my entire identity is built on understanding the underlying mechanics of my business. I know how the cash flows. I know how the debt is structured.
You know the plumbing.
Exactly. Now you're telling me I need to lead an AI transformation, but I don't know how a neural network assigns weights and biases. Isn't that like asking me to be the chief engineer of a nuclear submarine when I only know how to drive a Honda Civic? How do I manage a black box?
That exact feeling of paralysis keeps exceptionally brilliant finance leaders frozen in place. They assume that because they can't write a Python script to interact with an API, they have no business leading an AI initiative.
It's intimidating.
Of course it is. But this is where we have to separate fluency from expertise. Think of it like managing corporate legal counsel. A great CFO doesn't need to have passed the bar exam, right?
Sure.
And they don't need to be able to draft a complex merger agreement from scratch. But they absolutely must have the legal fluency to read a contract, spot the commercial risks, ask the external lawyers the most piercing questions, and ultimately make a business decision based on that legal advice.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So applied to AI, I don't need to know how the large language model mathematically calculates the next probable token. I just need to know how to brief it, interrogate its outputs, and manage the risk of its deployment.
Precisely that. The source text outlines 5 foundational pillars that constitute this necessary fluency for a CFO. If you master these 5 pillars, you can confidently lead the transformation without ever writing a line of code.
Let's walk through them. What's the first pillar?
The first pillar is understanding what a tool like Claude can do reliably today. Not what the marketing brochures promise it will do in 3 years, but its actual empirical strengths right now.
Like what specifically?
Things like unstructured data synthesis, rapid pattern recognition in dense text, and formatting complex qualitative information.
And the second pillar, because I imagine understanding what it's bad at is actually more important for risk management.
You hit the nail on the head. The second pillar is indeed the cornerstone of safety. You must deeply understand where the model can be highly persuasive, but factually entirely incorrect. We refer to these instances as hallucinations.
Let's pause and define that, because hallucination sounds like the AI is just having a weird digital dream. But the reality is far more insidious in a financial context, isn't it?
It's incredibly insidious.
If I give a spreadsheet to an AI, is it actually running mathematical calculations in the background, or is it doing something else?
It is fundamentally doing something else, unless it has been explicitly equipped with a separate code interpreter. A standard large language model is essentially the world's most advanced autocomplete.
Just predicting words.
Exactly. It's designed to predict the next most mathematically probable word or token based on its vast training data. So if you ask it a conceptual question, It strings together highly logical sentences.
But if I ask it to do math,
If you ask it to calculate a complex compound interest formula buried within a dense PDF, it might not actually do the math. It might simply predict the numbers that look like they belong in a compound interest calculation based on the text patterns it has seen before.
oh wow, which means it will give you an answer that is formatted perfectly, sounds incredibly confident, and is completely fabricated.
Yeah. That is terrifying. A persuasive lie sitting right in the middle of a variance report.
Exactly. Recognizing that structural limitation is a core component of fluency.
Okay, so that's two pillars, strengths and hallucinations. What's the third?
The third pillar involves knowing which specific finance workflows are actually suitable for testing. You don't start by handing over your tax compliance or your treasury cash movements.
That would be a fast way to get fired.
Absolutely. You start with unstructured, judgment-heavy tasks that already require human review anyway.
Makes sense. And the fourth pillar?
The fourth pillar focuses on the data architecture. You must understand the privacy and control implications. If you paste an unreleased M&A target into a public, consumer-facing chatbot, you have just committed a massive data breach.
Because the model might use your prompt as training data for someone else's query later.
Exactly. And finally, the fifth pillar is talent architecture. A fluent CFO needs to know how these tools change the required skill sets for the next generation of finance professionals so they can update their hiring profiles accordingly. If I synthesize all of that, the overarching message for the listener is that this cannot be delegated. You can't just call up your chief information officer, hand them budget for a few enterprise licenses, and say, let me know when the finance AI is up and running.
Delegation without personal understanding is an abdication of leadership in this context. The guide is adamant that you must experiment yourself to know what good actually looks like.
Because if you don't use it, you can't govern it.
Right. If you haven't personally pushed the boundaries of a model to see where it breaks, you won't have the intuition required to govern a team of analysts who are using it every day. You won't know if they are utilizing the tools effectively or if they're blindly trusting hallucinated outputs.
So we have established the absolute necessity of fluency and the 5 pillars that support it. Now we really need to ask, what exactly are we getting fluent in?
A very necessary question.
Because the term AI is a massive, somewhat unhelpful umbrella term right now. It covers everything from the algorithm recommending movies on Netflix to the software driving a car.
Right, it's too broad.
But the source material narrows our focus sharply. We are moving away from the conceptual cloud of artificial intelligence and drilling down into specific frontier applications. It heavily indexes on Anthropic's Claude and a crucial paradigm shift toward what the industry calls agentic AI.
The evolution of the user interface is perhaps the most critical technological narrative for finance leaders to track right now.
It's a profound shift. I mean, when most people envision using AI today, they still picture a simple chat interface. You type a prompt into a text box, you hit enter, and the machine types an answer back to you. It's a standalone, isolated interaction.
Like a superpowered search engine.
Exactly. But the product direction for tools like Claude for financial services is obliterating that isolated chat box model. It's no longer just a digital oracle you consult. It's actively pulling in live market data feeds, it's securely indexing your internal proprietary databases, and it's synthesizing external financial research all within a unified ecosystem.
The term agentic AI represents a massive leap. It's moving from a system that merely answers questions to a system that can execute a sequence of actions to achieve a goal. If we connect this to the bigger picture, an agent has tools at its disposal.
Let's break that down, because tools and software can mean a lot of things. How does an agent actually use a tool?
Think of the base large language model as the brain. On its own, it can only think and write. But developers can give that brain access to an internet browser, a Python coding environment, or a secure connection to an internal SQL database.
So it can reach out into other systems.
Exactly. When you give an agent a complex prompt, for example, tell me why our logistics costs in Europe spiked last quarter, the agent doesn't just try to guess the answer. It writes a plan.
It actually plans its steps.
Yes. It decides, first, I need to write a SQL query to extract the European shipping ledger. Second, I need to send that data to my Python tool to run a regression analysis against global fuel prices. Third, I will write a summary of the findings. And it executes that loop autonomously.
That is incredible. It is reasoning about how to use other software programs to solve your problem.
It is.
But even with all that capability, There is a specific feature within Claude that the source highlights as the absolute holy grail for a finance professional. And it's surprisingly simple, direct links back to the source materials.
It sounds trivial, but it fundamentally alters the utility of the software. Anthropic understands that in finance, trust is completely irrelevant without verification.
Trust but verify.
Always. An output could be 99% accurate, but if a CFO cannot verify the underlying data trail, they cannot use it in a regulatory or board-level context. By forcing the model to explicitly cite its sources, literally hyperlinking back to the exact paragraph in a massive PDF or the specific cell in a spreadsheet, the tool is showing its work.
It changes the mental model entirely. You're no longer treating the AI as an omniscient truth teller. You're treating it as an incredibly fast, highly capable researcher who provides an intelligent working draft.
Yes, a draft.
And the expectation is that the human professional will click those links, verify the citations, and apply commercial judgment before finalizing the document.
That's the only way to use it safely.
But this integration goes even further than specialized platforms like Anthropic. The source text brings in material regarding Oracle's AI finance strategy. Oracle's not talking about going to a separate website to chat with an AI.
No, they're taking a different route.
They are embedding these agents directly into the central nervous system of corporate finance, the enterprise resource planning systems, the ERPs, and the enterprise performance management systems.
The transition from standalone AI to embedded AI is the moment the technology becomes invisible and ubiquitous. When the AI is sitting natively inside your ERP, it has real-time, inherent access to your transaction processing, your historical planning data, and your live forecasting models.
It's just built in.
Exactly. It can run anomaly detection in the background continuously without you ever having to manually export a CSV file and upload it to a separate tool.
And Microsoft is doing the exact same thing with Copilot. The AI is just following you around your digital office. It's in Excel helping you write macros. It's in PowerPoint generating slides from a Word document. It's in Outlook summarizing a massive email thread about a contract negotiation.
This convergence signals that we're rapidly moving past the era where AI is viewed as a novelty. It's becoming a source-controlled, deeply integrated layer of the software stack.
It's just how work gets done now.
Right. The guide specifically points out that Anthropic has already released 10 ready-to-run finance agent templates. We aren't talking about abstract capabilities. We're talking about pre-configured agents designed for know-your-customer screening, pitch book generation, valuation reviews, and statement audits.
So the templates are already built.
They are. This introduces a structural shift in how finance work is actually performed. We are transitioning from an operational model where humans manually execute processes to a model where humans supervise intelligent agents.
Supervising agents.
PwC recently published a vision of an AI-native finance function, and this is exactly what they are describing. The analyst of the future spends less time aggregating data in spreadsheets and more time reviewing, editing, and strategically directing the output of a swarm of specialized software agents.
If I'm an executive listening to this, I am nodding along. I understand the shift to embedded agents. I understand the need for fluency. But the burning question is always, well, what do I practically do with this on Monday morning?
The most important question.
Right. If the technology is this powerful, but the hallucination risk is still present, where are the safe sandboxes? What are the exact low-risk, high-value workflows my team should start experimenting with today?
The guide provides a masterful heuristic for identifying these starting points. Before you even look at a specific workflow, you apply this rule of thumb. You are looking for tasks that fit a very specific four-part profile.
Okay, let's hear it.
First, the task must be commercially important. Do not waste time automating trivialities. Second, it must be repetitive. It needs to be something your team does frequently enough to measure an actual time saving. Third, it must be judgment-heavy. This plays to the AI's ability to synthesize unstructured information rather than just doing rote math.
And the fourth part is the safety valve, right?
Precisely. The fourth and absolutely most critical criterion is that the AI's output must naturally require human review before it is considered final. You do not automate a workflow that instantly sends a binding payment or publishes a finalized public statement. You automate the heavy lifting of the first draft.
Important, repetitive, judgment-heavy, but not final. That is a brilliant filter.
It really keeps you out of trouble.
Using that framework, the source text details 7 primary use cases. They cleverly call them the Magnificent 7 practical use cases for a modern CFO. Let's really dig into the mechanics of each of these because this is where the theoretical framework translates into actual commercial velocity.
Let's do it.
Use case number 1, board paper preparation. Traditionally, drafting the board pack is a grueling, brute force data gathering exercise. You're pulling numbers from 20 different department heads and trying to make it look cohesive.
And the common failure mode of a board paper is that it successfully reports the numbers, but completely fails to explain the commercial narrative behind them.
Right. So how does Claude fix that? The guide suggests you take your messy, human-written draft of the board paper, feed it into the model securely, and this is key. You don't ask it to rewrite the numbers.
No, definitely not.
You ask it to critique the narrative. You prompt it with, act as a highly critical activist board member. Read this financial summary. Where is the strategic story unclear? Which of my assertions lacks sufficient data evidence? What are the 3 most aggressive questions you would ask me about this report?
It serves as a tireless, completely impartial sounding board. A human colleague might hesitate to tell the CFO that their explanation of margin squeeze makes no sense.
They don't want to step on any toes?
Exactly. But the AI has no such social hesitation. It will dispassionately identify the logical gaps in your narrative, allowing you to patch them before you ever step foot in the boardroom. It transforms board preparation from a formatting exercise into a rigorous intellectual stress test.
Which saves you from a very uncomfortable Tuesday morning.
Exactly.
Moving to use case number 2, forecast narrative and scenario testing. This one is fascinating because it fundamentally changes how we interact with financial models. The text references a fantastic discussion from McKinsey featuring Sarah Friar, the chief financial officer at OpenAI. She discusses the power of pairing the AI's advanced reasoning capabilities directly with financial models.
Traditionally, scenario testing is a highly mechanical, often rigid process. You build a massive Excel model, and then you manually change specific variables, say increasing the expected inflation rate in cell C4 by 2%, and you watch how the cascading formulas impact your projected cash flow.
It's entirely mathematical. You're just tweaking cells.
Right. But Friar is suggesting a conversational exploration of strategy.
Conversational. How does that work with a spreadsheet?
You provide the model with the financial data and the written narrative explaining your assumptions. Then, instead of just tweaking numbers, you ask natural language questions.
Oh, like asking it what-if scenarios.
Exactly. You ask, if our European supply chain is disrupted for 3 months, based on the historical data I just provided, how does that impact our debt covenants, and which of our operating assumptions become the weakest?
You're forcing the AI to synthesize the quantitative data with the qualitative risk factors. It bridges the gap between the spreadsheet and the real world.
It really does. It brings the numbers to life.
Use case number 3 is month-end close improvement. Now, to be clear, the guide is not suggesting you let the AI actually perform the month-end close. That violates the risk framework entirely. You do not let a probabilistic engine finalize your accounting records.
The key word here is improvement. You are using the AI to analyze the metadata of your workflow, not to execute the workflow itself.
How does that look in practice?
Every finance team has a massive, often overly complicated month-end close checklist, hundreds of line items, dependencies, and handoffs. You securely upload that checklist and your process documentation, and you ask Claude to analyze it for structural inefficiencies.
Looking for bottlenecks.
Yes. You ask, identify any steps where ownership is ambiguous, flag any processes where the required evidence attachments are not explicitly defined. Suggest a reorganization of these tasks to eliminate bottlenecks based on standard accounting best practices. You're basically using it as an operational consultant to refine your process.
That's incredibly smart. Use case number 4, contract and policy review. This is a massive time sink for finance teams, especially when dealing with complex supplier agreements or customer contracts. You can use the model for rapid issue spotting. Let's say you have a 150-page master service agreement from a new logistics vendor. You upload it and ask the AI to extract and summarize all commercial obligations, penalty clauses, and non-standard payment terms.
This is where we have to discuss the mechanics of the AI's attention mechanism. Large language models are incredibly good at finding needles in haystacks, but they are not infallible.
They can miss things.
They can. If a contract has a bizarre, double negative clause buried in an appendix on page 142 that subtly shifts liability back to you, the AI might miss it if the prompt isn't crafted perfectly, or if the model's attention drifts.
Which is precisely why that 4th safety rule is paramount. Human review is mandatory.
Always mandatory.
The AI does the initial heavy lifting. It structures the data. It gives you a highly organized summary of the potential risks in 30 seconds. But you, or your legal counsel, still have to read the actual clauses and apply human commercial judgment to determine if those terms are acceptable.
It is an accelerator, not an autopilot.
I love that phrase. Let's look at use case number 5. Financial planning and analysis, or FP&A question generation. The guide makes a profound observation here. It says finance teams spend entirely too much of their bandwidth physically producing the management reporting packs, and far too little time actually analyzing them to shape strategic questions for the rest of the business.
It's a huge misallocation of time.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. I want to use an analogy to illustrate this mechanism. Using Claude for FP&A question generation is essentially like having a brilliant, utterly tireless junior analyst on your staff.
The dream employee.
Right. Imagine you have an analyst who does not need to sleep, doesn't get bored, and has perfect recall of whatever you put in front of them. You hand them a dense 200-page management pack on a Friday night. You ask them to read every single page, compare the divisional performances against the historical baselines, separate the actual material variances from the statistical noise, and hand you a one-page summary of the 5 most glaring operational inconsistencies to ask the head of sales on Monday morning.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the value proposition. Human beings naturally suffer from cognitive fatigue. Reading a 200-page pack of dense financial tables is exhausting, and by page 150, a human analyst is simply not processing information with the same acuity as they were on page 10.
It all just becomes a blur of numbers.
But the AI does not fatigue. It applies the exact same level of rigorous attention to the final footnote as it does to the executive summary. It acts as a massive amplifier for your own critical thinking, ensuring you walk into management meetings armed with the most piercing, data-backed questions possible. That's a game changer. Use case number 6, investor, lender, and audit preparation. This is all about defeating the blank page, and the blank page is the ultimate enemy of executive productivity.
Oh, absolutely.
Staring at a blinking cursor, trying to draft the first version of a Q&A pack for an upcoming investor roadshow, or trying to write out covenant discussion notes for your banking syndicate, it takes hours of mental activation energy. The model excels at generating the 0 to 1 draft. You feed it your historical financials, your draft press release, and perhaps a transcript of a competitor's recent earnings call. You ask it to generate a comprehensive list of potential questions investors might ask, along with draft responses grounded strictly in your provided documentation.
Again, the CFO remains 100% accountable for the final accuracy of those answers. If you read a draft response to a hostile investor question, you might completely rewrite it to adjust the tone. But editing a structurally sound first draft takes a fraction of the time and cognitive load of creating it from scratch.
It gets you from 0 to 60 instantly. And finally, use case number 7, role design. This is a slightly meta application, but it is incredibly strategic. A forward-thinking CFO uses the AI to review their own department's job descriptions.
Wait, how does that work? Are you just asking it to write a job ad?
No, you are using it for strategic workforce planning. You upload the detailed job description for, say, a mid-level financial analyst on your team. You prompt the model. Based on the current trajectory of generative AI and embedded ERP agents, dynamically analyze the tasks in this job description. Which of these duties are highly likely to be automated within the next 24 months, and which duties fundamentally require human commercial judgment and relationship building?
That is a phenomenal exercise. It immediately highlights whether you are hiring for the future or if you're accidentally building a team designed to solve the problems of 2020.
Exactly.
If an applicant's entire resume is built around their ability to manually reconcile VO cups in Excel, and the AI tells you that capability is about to be commoditized by embedded agents, you need to pivot your hiring criteria towards strategic communication and systems thinking.
You don't want to hire for skills that won't exist in 2 years.
Okay, so we have this framework. We have these 7 brilliant use cases. But having that tireless junior analyst is only beneficial if you know how to give them clear instructions. And in the realm of generative AI, giving instructions is called prompting.
Right. Prompt engineering.
And a lot of financial professionals hear the phrase prompt engineering and they immediately shut down. They think it implies learning a complex programming syntax.
That intimidation factor is a massive barrier to entry, and the source text does an excellent job of dismantling it. The guide argues that the inherent mindset of a successful chief financial officer is naturally perfectly calibrated for advanced prompting.
I love that perspective. How do they justify it?
If you look at Anthropic's official technical documentation on prompt engineering, their foundational advice does not involve code. Their advice is, define your success criteria explicitly, provide necessary context, constrain the output format, and rigorously test against those criteria.
That just sounds like good management.
That is not software engineering. That is just writing a highly effective business brief. As a finance leader, you do this constantly. If you ask a human associate to analyze a market trend, you don't just say, make this report better. Better is entirely subjective and unquantifiable.
Right, you'd never say that to an employee.
You say, analyze these 3 specific markets, highlight any variance over 5%, and present the findings in a bulleted list prioritized by total revenue impact.
Strong prompting is simply strong business communication. And the guide provides 4 specific, highly practical prompt patterns tailored specifically for the financial executive. We really need to detail these because they form the actual syntax of fluency.
They are crucial tools.
The first pattern is role and task. You literally instruct the model on the persona it needs to adopt before it begins processing. You don't just ask a question. You frame it by saying, act as a conservative, highly detail-oriented chief financial officer who is reviewing this proposed capital expenditure request for commercial clarity, hidden assumptions, and downside control risk.
By establishing the persona, you are mathematically constraining the probability space of the model's output. You are forcing it to prioritize vocabulary, tone, and analytical frameworks associated with financial conservatism, rather than letting it wander into a generic or overly optimistic response.
That's a great way to think about it. The second pattern is arguably the most important for mitigating our biggest fear, the evidence-first pattern. This is how you combat hallucinations.
Yes, this is non-negotiable. When you ask a model to synthesize a massive document, you must append an instruction like, before providing your summary or recommendations, you must first extract and quote the exact verbatim sentences from the source text that support your conclusion.
Let me explain the mechanism behind why that works so well. When you ask a model a question, it relies on its internal weights, its training data, to generate an answer. But when you force it to physically reproduce the exact quote from your provided document first, you pull its attention mechanism away from its generalized training data and force it to ground its subsequent reasoning entirely in your specific text. It anchors the math.
It creates an internal audit trail within the AI's own reasoning loop. If it cannot find the quote to satisfy the first part of the prompt, it is far less likely to invent a conclusion for the second part.
The third pattern is challenge mode. I think every executive should use this daily. You prompt the model to attack your logic. Review my proposed strategic rationale for this divestiture. List the 5 most difficult adversarial questions a skeptical institutional investor would ask, and explain why my current draft fails to answer them.
You are basically building an adversarial testing environment right on your laptop. You are utilizing the AI's ability to pattern match against millions of historical business debates to find the blind spots in your own argument.
And the fourth pattern combines risk tiering with the controls lens. If you ask the model to review a proposed change to procurement policy, you explicitly instruct it. Classify all identified risks as high, medium, or low. Furthermore, explicitly identify any points in this workflow where automated processing must stop and human segregation of duties must remain legally mandated.
Which serves as the perfect pivot point for our discussion. Because while these prompting techniques are incredibly powerful, we have to pause and confront the high-stakes reality of the finance sector. We have to talk about controls and governance.
Absolutely, because let's be honest about the stakes here. If the marketing department uses an AI to generate 10 subject lines for a promotional email campaign, and the AI hallucinates a slightly weird phrasing, what is the consequence? Maybe the open rate drops by 0.5%. It's negligible.
Right. No one gets fired over an email subject line.
But if a CFO uses an AI to help draft the narrative around an impairment model or to extract parameters for a complex debt covenant calculation and the AI hallucinates a number, that is not a minor error. That is a catastrophic failure. That can result in regulatory fines, market panic, and immediate termination. The risk profile is fundamentally asymmetric.
The source text relies heavily on PwC's framework for responsible AI to navigate this asymmetry. It argues that because finance operates in a low-tolerance environment for factual error, the control environment cannot be something you dolt on after the fact. It cannot be an afterthought. Governance must be engineered in parallel with experimentation.
I see a lot of companies reacting to that risk profile by just shutting everything down. They look at the hallucination risk, they look at the data privacy concerns, and the IT department just issues a blanket ban. No generative AI allowed on company networks. Is that a viable strategy for a CFO to support?
It is arguably the most dangerous strategy a company can deploy.
Really? More dangerous than using it.
Yes, if you attempt a blanket ban on a technology that is this accessible and this powerful, you do not actually stop its use. You merely drive it underground. You create a massive invisible problem known as shadow IT.
Oh, because people are just going to use it on their personal devices.
Exactly. Your ambitious junior analysts, who are desperate to save time on a Friday afternoon, will simply copy highly sensitive, unreleased financial data from their secure corporate laptop, email it to their personal Gmail account, and paste it into a public AI chatbot on their personal iPad.
Which means your most confidential data is now being fed into a public training model, completely outside of your security perimeter with zero audit trail. The genie is well and truly out of the bottle. You cannot pretend the technology does not exist.
Exactly. So the extreme of prohibition is dangerous. But the opposite, extreme, laissez-faire, uncontrolled adoption, where everyone is just plugging AI into everything, is equally disastrous in finance. You cannot allow uncontrolled models anywhere near your finalized regulatory reporting, your tax computations, your treasury cash movements, or any workflows involving highly confidential personal data.
So what is the practical balance stance for the CFO? How do you walk that tightrope between shadow IT and reckless automation?
The guide advocates for the creation of a tightly controlled, explicitly defined experimentation sandbox. As the CFO, working in tandem with the CIO, you proactively construct a safe environment. You secure enterprise licenses that guarantee legally that your inputs are not used to drain the vendor's base models.
So the data stays yours.
Right. Then, you clearly define which specific low-risk use cases, like the Magnificent Seven we discussed, are approved for experimentation.
All right.
Crucially, you define the human-in-the-loop requirements. You mandate which outputs require logged human approval before they can be utilized.
And then you have to communicate that upward, right?
And perhaps most importantly for executive leadership, you proactively educate your audit committee and your board of directors about this framework.
That last point is the hallmark of true leadership. You bring the conversation to the board before a crisis forces the conversation upon you. You sit down with the audit committee and say, here is our enterprise AI strategy. Here is the productivity upside we are targeting. And here's the precise governance framework we have implemented to ensure zero impact on our regulatory compliance. You are steering the ship, not just reacting to the icebergs.
The mandate for the CFO in 2026 is not to act as a roadblock to innovation. Your job is not to slow down technological adoption out of a generalized fear. Your mandate is to make AI adoption simultaneously commercially impactful and highly defensible to your auditors.
You remain the ultimate guardian of commercial trust.
The introduction of artificial intelligence does not alter that fundamental responsibility. It merely requires you to govern a new, incredibly powerful set of tools.
We have spent a lot of time deep in the operational weeds, the mechanics of prompting, the structure of embedded agents, the nuances of shadow IT. I want to shift gears and look at the broader macroeconomic horizon. What are the architects of this technology saying? What are the tech titans, the people actually building these frontier models, projecting for the enterprise? And more importantly, how does their vision directly dictate the trajectory of your career and your marketability as a financial executive?
Listening to the individuals operating at the absolute frontier of this technology is always highly instructive because they are seeing the capabilities that the enterprise market will adopt in 12 to 18 months. The source synthesizes public insights from several highly influential figures, and the convergence of their messaging is striking when applied to corporate leadership.
Let's start with Jensen Huang.
Right. Consider the perspective of Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. He has spoken extensively about initiatives like Project GR0T, which focuses on foundation models designed to deeply understand multimodal inputs and natural language. His overarching thesis is that human language is rapidly becoming the new, primary interface for all computing technology.
We need to unpack the implications of that for a non-technical leader. If human language is the new coding language, what does that mean for a CFO who has spent 20 years perfecting their ability to communicate complex business strategies?
It means that your existing skill set has just been massively augmented. If you possess the ability to speak with precision, reason logically through complex commercial problems, and articulate a rigorous business brief which are the absolute core competencies of any successful finance leader, you now hold the keys to operating the most advanced analytical technology on the planet.
So you don't need to go back to school for computer science.
You no longer require an army of data scientists to act as translators between your strategic vision and the database. AI fluency is no longer a specialized technical discipline. It is a fundamental general management imperative.
That is an incredibly empowering realization. Your ability to think clearly is now your most technical asset.
Exactly.
The text also highlights commentary from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. He frequently discusses what he terms the deployment gap. This is the phenomenon where the raw capability of the frontier models is advancing significantly faster than the organizational capacity of large enterprises to actually adopt them. He notes that corporate leaders do not have a perfect, finalized playbook yet because the technology is iterating too quickly.
Acknowledging that deployment gap is crucial for executive sanity. There is no perfect multi-year implementation manual to follow. Altman's observation is that the organizations pulling ahead, the ones realizing actual productivity gains, are the ones that embrace the controlled experimentation sandbox we discussed earlier.
They don't wait for permission.
They deploy the technology in safe, defined areas, they learn from actual empirical usage, they adjust their controls dynamically, and they do not wait for absolute certainty before initiating momentum.
Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, reinforces that exact sentiment. He warns that artificial intelligence is improving exponentially across virtually all domains of intellectual labor. His core advice to leaders is to not wait for the dust to settle. If you wait until the regulatory landscape, the software integrations, and the use cases are all perfectly standardized and obvious to everyone, you will have entirely forfeited the competitive advantage. You will be buying commoditized software rather than building an agile capability.
But, and this is a highly necessary caveat, we must aggressively temper the enthusiasm of those tech titans with a very stark, very sobering warning derived from the IBM enterprise research cited in our guide.
Yes, the AI theater warning. I found this dynamic fascinating and honestly highly recognizable in corporate culture. We mentioned earlier that nearly 70% of CFOs claim AI is central to their strategy. But the IBM data reveals a massive discrepancy. Fewer than 30% of those organizations are actually optimizing the technology in their core processes.
It represents the vast, dangerous chasm between discussing AI in board meetings to sound innovative and doing the grueling, unglamorous work of actually re-engineering how work gets done within the finance function.
The guide is refreshingly blunt about this phenomenon. It states that commercial value is generated exclusively through execution, not through AI theater. It is remarkably easy to authorize the purchase of 100 enterprise licenses, launch an internal task force, and issue a press release declaring that you are building an AI-driven finance department.
Anyone can do that.
It is immensely difficult to actually map an accounts payable workflow, train the staff, validate the model outputs, and capture the cost savings.
But the data shows that the mature adopters, that small minority who are actually executing, are seeing tangible, measurable results. They are completing their annual budgeting cycles weeks faster. They're driving significant reductions in their accounts payable processing costs. And most importantly, they are taking the human capital freed up by those efficiencies and redeploying it toward high-value strategic analysis that actually impacts the bottom line.
Which naturally leads to the ultimate question for the listener. How does all of this dictate your personal career trajectory?
Right. Let's talk about executive marketability.
The guide we are analyzing was published by Byron Recruitment, which is an executive search firm. That context is vital because they have a front row seat to the actual conversations happening inside boardrooms. They know exactly what CEOs and search committees are demanding when they interview candidates for a CFO or VP of finance role today.
And their insight is that the required profile is undergoing a rapid evolution. Now, to be perfectly clear, the foundational requirements of the role remain absolute. A board of directors still demands a CFO with unimpeachable technical finance expertise. They still require rigorous cash discipline, a deep understanding of corporate governance, and the executive gravitas necessary to maintain the confidence of investors and lenders.
Right, the basics don't go away.
If you cannot accurately model cash flow and manage liquidity, your ability to write a clever prompt for an LLM is completely irrelevant.
The table stakes are still the table stakes. AI fluency does not replace a CPA or a deep understanding of capital markets.
Precisely. However, what is fundamentally changing is the expected operating rhythm of the finance function. Boards are demanding increased speed, broader strategic insight, and a leaner cost structure while delivering those table stakes. Byron Thomas Recruitment notes a massive, highly decisive differentiation in how candidates are presenting themselves during executive interviews.
I loved the contrast they provided in the guide. Imagine two different CFO candidates interviewing for the same role. The board asks them about their approach to technology and efficiency. Candidate A sits back and says, "Oh yes, artificial intelligence is certainly a priority. Our IT department is currently evaluating a few enterprise solutions, and we have a committee looking into potential future applications for the finance team once the compliance landscape becomes a bit clearer."
Candidate A sounds entirely passive. They sound like a spectator waiting for the future to be delivered to them by the IT department.
Now contrast that with Candidate B. Candidate B leans forward and says, "I have personally established a secure testing sandbox for my team. Over the last quarter, I have personally tested Anthropic's Claude against our last 3 board reporting cycles and our month-end close checklist to identify process bottlenecks. I understand the specific mechanics required to validate model outputs and prevent hallucinations. I have authored the governance framework for my department's experimentation, and I am actively managing the cultural change required to upskill my analysts from manual data aggregators to strategic reviewers."
The disparity in executive presence between those two answers is monumental. Candidate B is not pretending to be a software engineer. They are not talking about Python or APIs. They are presenting themselves as a commercially trusted leader who profoundly understands how new technology structurally alters risk, operational speed, and talent architecture.
They are demonstrating leverage, and boards are actively buying that capability. They are hiring executives who provide the confidence necessary to navigate this technological transition safely and profitably.
It's the ultimate differentiator right now.
So, we have comprehensively covered the why, the what, and the who. We understand the threat, the tools, the use cases, and the career implications. Now, let's bring this all the way down to the ground level. We want to equip the listener with the exact how. The source material outlines a brilliant, highly pragmatic 30-day blueprint.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
It's a step-by-step, risk-mitigated roadmap that you can literally begin executing tomorrow morning. Let's walk through this blueprint week by week.
This blueprint is the mechanism for actually building the fluency we have been discussing. It is entirely predicated on generating contained, low-risk, highly educational momentum.
Week 1 is dedicated to learning the interface. The absolute non-negotiable golden rule for this first week is to use public materials only. You do not upload a single piece of proprietary company data, you do not use internal emails, and you certainly do not use unreleased financial figures.
Keep it totally public.
Instead, you go to the SEC website and download a competitor's massive 200-page 10K annual report. You feed that public document into the AI, and you start practicing the prompt patterns we discussed. You ask it to summarize the key risk factors cited by the competitor. You upload a second competitor's 10K and ask the model to compare and contrast their stated M&A strategies. You ask it to draft 5 aggressive analytical questions an activist investor might ask based on the stated cash flow trends.
The objective of week 1 is purely mechanical familiarization. You are developing a tactile understanding of how the model's interface responds to varying levels of instruction. And most crucially, you are establishing the psychological habit of skepticism. Every time the model provides an answer about that competitor's report, you force yourself to physically check the source document to verify the claim. You are training yourself to be an editor, not a passive consumer of AI outputs.
Moving into week 2. Test internal style without sensitive data. You are now moving the experimentation slightly closer to your actual daily operations, but you are still rigorously defending the control environment by utilizing anonymized or deeply historical material.
Correct. You do not use this month's draft financials. You go into the archives and pull a board paper from 3 years ago. You manually strip out any specific client names, sensitive employee data, or proprietary strategic details that remain confidential.
Just scrub it clean.
Exactly. Then you deploy the model against this sanitized internal document. You ask it to rewrite a dense, jargon-filled historical forecast commentary into clear, concise, commercially focused language. Or, as we discussed earlier, you upload a blank copy of your standard month-end close checklist and ask it to suggest structural improvements for accountability.
The goal here is to see how the model interacts with your specific corporate tone, your unique operational frameworks, and the typical complexity of your internal communications without risking the exposure of any current material non-public information.
It builds internal confidence.
Then we arrive at week 3. Build a use case shortlist. You have spent 2 weeks building personal fluency, you understand what the tool is good at, and you have seen it hallucinate a citation. Now you sit down and formally rank potential real-world applications for your broader finance team. You evaluate potential projects based on three strict criteria: commercial value, risk profile, and data readiness.
This is a classic financial prioritization exercise.
Fine.
You might identify that triaging exceptions in the accounts payable ledger is a phenomenal early use case. It is a high-volume activity, the strategic risk of an error is relatively low compared to regulatory reporting, and the underlying data is usually well-structured and accessible. Conversely, you might look at automating complex tax depreciation schedules and immediately disqualify it due to the unacceptable risk profile. You are building a pragmatic pipeline of projects that will actually move the needle on your team's operational efficiency.
Finally, week 4. Set guardrails. This is the moment you put your executive leadership hat fully back on. You take the insights you have gained from your personal experimentation, and you draft a simple, unambiguous usage policy for your finance department.
You have to write it down.
You define the parameters in black and white. What specific classifications of data are permissible to upload? What data is strictly, categorically forbidden? Which specific workflows require documented human approval before an AI-generated output can be utilized? What is the internal standard for citing an AI model as a source in an internal memo?
And the culmination of week 4 is the presentation. As the guy emphasizes, artificial intelligence adoption within the finance function cannot operate as a quiet, shadow IT side project. You take this newly drafted policy and your short list of validated use cases, and you present it formally to the broader executive team and the audit committee. You own the initiative. You demonstrate to the board that you are leading the technological transformation with commercial aggression and absolute governance.
Let's take a deep breath and recap the extensive journey we have just navigated. We initiated this deep dive by confronting the existential dread that plagues so many professionals, the fear of a highly capable machine rendering their hard-earned expertise obsolete. But by rigorously unpacking this guide, we have transitioned from that generalized, paralyzing anxiety to a highly tactical, highly commercial understanding of the actual landscape.
It is a totally different landscape once you understand it.
Frontier models like Claude are not being deployed to replace the chief financial officer. They are being deployed as brilliant, tireless analytical sounding boards. They are unprecedented workflow accelerators, and they are uniquely powerful for financial leadership, provided, and this is the absolute non-negotiable caveat, provided the requisite controls, the rigorous human skepticism, and the proactive governance frameworks are firmly embedded in the operational model.
I want to reinforce a final essential concept for the listener. As you adopt these tools, as you implement the 30-day blueprint, recognize that your core human capabilities, your seasoned commercial judgment, your deep understanding of structural risk, your ability to navigate complex stakeholder relationships, none of those skills are being diminished by the machine. They're being vastly amplified. By offloading the brute force, manual aggregation of data to the AI, you are permanently elevating yourself to the role of a strategic editor, a critical thinker, and a proactive architect of business value.
Which brings us full circle to where we began. We talked about the comforting certainty of that perfectly balanced ledger versus the murky, unpredictable fog of generative technology. It feels significantly less murky now. It feels like we have been handed a flashlight and a map.
We really have.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on as you navigate your upcoming week. We discussed NVIDIA's Jensen Huang and his assertion that human language rather than code is rapidly becoming the primary interface for operating enterprise technology.
A profound shift.
If that thesis holds true, if you no longer require a computer science degree to command the most powerful analytical engines ever created, then the most vital, highly technical skill you can cultivate for the remainder of your career might simply be the ability to ask a profoundly insightful question.
That changes everything about how we learn.
As artificial intelligence reliably absorbs the rote mechanics, the preliminary data synthesis, and the massive aggregation tasks inherent in corporate finance, will the chief financial officer of 2030 look less like a chief accountant and more like the ultimate strategic philosopher of the business?
It represents a fascinating fundamental shift in professional identity. The ultimate executive value is rapidly migrating from the ability to generate the answers to the wisdom required to ask the right questions.
Something to carefully consider the next time you are reviewing a balance sheet. Until next time, keep asking those profoundly good questions.